In a world where talent is evenly distributed, but venture capital is concentrated in coastal silos, smart startup money is heading for the Midcontinent. Welcome to the Midcon Markup, a podcast that uncovers the inspiring stories of our visionary tech entrepreneurs and the investors who believe in them. I'm your host, Cody Merrill with Cortado Ventures. Listen, learn, and make your Midcon Markup. Welcome to another episode of the Midcon Markup. Today, we are fortunate to be joined by Lieutenant Governor Matt Pinnell.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, welcome onto the show. It's great to have you in the office. And I just want to start off by saying, as a native Oklahoman, born and raised, went and worked elsewhere and came back, I really appreciate your voice in particular and championing the cause of Oklahoma, bringing innovative solutions to Oklahoma and helping shift the state towards a future where whenever I would have kids, it would be somewhere where I feel like they could thrive.
Good. Well, that makes me proud because that's why we got into this crazy political environment in the first place. In the lieutenant governor position was really to address those specific needs. I grew up in Oklahoma and felt like we weren't bragging about the things that we should be bragging about, and yes, fixing the things that we should be trying to fix. We can do both at the same time. And some of the branding efforts over the last few years and just, telling the world, because it is a global competition, telling the world that, this modern frontier is real and it's open for business. And it's been exciting the last couple of years.
Let's travel back in time. What was childhood like for the mini lieutenant governor? What did you want to be? Did you know that you had a penchant for politics? Were you in student government?
Yeah.
What's the progression of thought that has led to this passion and this desire to act?
Well, and you said act because that's kind of where a lot of people don't know that part of my story. So I grew up in Tulsa. My dad was a Springfield, Missouri native, and he grew up playing tennis and got a scholarship to TU. So, the rest is history. Went to TU and met his bride, my mom, and I've lived in Tulsa most of my entire life. After college, was out in D.C. for a few years.
Where'd you go to high school?
Went to high school, Metro Christian Academy.
I was a BA guy.
Okay,
so
yeah. Went to Metro. Grew up in Tulsa public schools and went to Metro for high school, and then went to Oral Roberts University for college. My wife and I both. And I did do student government, but I was in drama. I was a drama kid. I was an arts kid. A lot of people find that funny and a little humorous, but I grew up kind of doing plays and did a lot of acting in high school. And when I went to ORU, I was a drama major my first 2 years. I was kind of like, okay, I may want to do this for a career, like go to LA and big dreams like that. And I did that for the first couple of years. I started getting more into student government kind of my junior year in college, and finally kind of made the pivot to, listen, I love being around people and being with people, and maybe I can do that through politics. And started campaigning and working on some political campaigns locally in the Tulsa area. Just really loved it and made kind of the full switch over to a public relations advertising major. So got out of the drama major my junior year, went full into PR advertising with a minor in government. Loved it. It worked on a couple campaigns after college and then moved to D.C. and then I really got into it. So kind of the rest is history after that. So I am able to still use some of those skills that I grew up on the acting side in the world of politics.
What is the origin of your interest in politics? Is it ideology? Is it pragmatism?
I would say for me, student government and politics for me was people. Early on, it was just learning from other people about what they believe, how they were raised was fascinating to me. I was never offended if someone, thought differently than me. It was always very intriguing to me. I wasn't a debate kid. I was more of I just liked being around a very diverse group of people. And that was certainly something that I got, in drama as well. So for me, it started with I liked being around people and talking to people about what they believed in. And that led to me getting involved in like the Oklahoma Intercollegiate Legislature, OIL, as they call it in Oklahoma. You write legislation, model legislation. You make a trip to the state capitol. I did a little bit of that. But it was less policy for me early on and more just very intrigued by, hey, it's a really big world out there. There's a lot of people that believe different things, and I always really enjoyed being in that environment.
I really respect your commitment to having an open mind, seeking differing perspectives. Can you give me an example of a time where somebody changed your mind, where your worldview fundamentally was altered by new evidence? And was it initially hard? Was it humbling to accept that? And then was it gratifying on the back end after you were able to achieve growth from it?
Yeah, great question. So for me, I was I grew up in Tulsa, so I was an urban kid. I didn't know what FFA was, right? Like I didn't know that there was an agricultural industry. I was very naive to, the individuals every day that, grow our food and feed the world. And for me, the policies and issues that affect rural Oklahoma versus urban Oklahoma was very eye-opening for me. Everything from housing policies to incentives that we offer versus in an urban area versus a rural area. And that did change my worldview a little bit on, hey, you're going back to kind of what I said at the beginning. The world isn't controlled by just those in tall buildings in urban areas. There's a lot of rural parts of this country, and what they believe and the barriers to growth, frankly, in those areas should be just as important to us as what affects Tulsa or Oklahoma City. And I don't say that as a political statement. I really, it was something that I was not raised on, and would have been blessed enough to now, obviously, in this political position, to go to those rural communities and understand that, oh gosh, what we're doing down at the state capitol, it might be prohibiting growth in a rural area. So really, my worldview has changed a whole lot more over the last 5 years than the first 40 years of my life, truly. Being inside of the building at 23rd and Lincoln and working with independents and Democrats and a lot of Republicans that didn't grow up the way that I grew up has helped shape a lot of the policy, the way that I look at policy today.
Do you believe that an urban voter should have as much influence as a rural voter?
I do. Yeah. I at the state capitol, you have more members from rural parts of the state because we have more rural parts of Oklahoma than urban areas. We got 77 counties. Most of them are rural. And so the rural legislatures have to check themselves sometimes because they're like, listen, yes, we have a rural caucus, but we have 77 counties. So what may work in Jackson County, yes, may not work as well in Oklahoma County. But we should be able to share that power equally at 23rd and Lincoln. And the divides at the state capitol a lot of times are more rural versus urban than Republican or Democrat. That was also something that I wasn't as aware of until I got elected into office. Yes, there are polarizing issues between political parties. A lot of times does come down to rural versus urban, education issues or healthcare policy. Those are issues that, again, speaking to, changing my worldview. I grew up in Tulsa with St. Francis 5 minutes down the street, one of the best healthcare systems in the entire country. I didn't grow up an hour and a half away from my childcare provider. And most of the state of Oklahoma lives that every day. That they may have to drive an hour and a half to everything from delivering a baby to meeting with their basic childcare doctor. And that has certainly changed my perspective on how we deliver healthcare in the state of Oklahoma.
What is Oklahoma doing to close that gap in rural access to healthcare? And to what extent does the growth in remote medicine is that a part of the plan to meet that need?
Very good question, and absolutely is part of the solution is telehealth. It can't provide everything. It's not a silver bullet. Telehealth is not, but it can go a long way to closing a gap. It's not the problems, and I wouldn't even call them problems. I mean, the barriers to providing healthcare in remote areas is not unique to Oklahoma. Every single state in the country is trying to address those challenges, and so we should look at how at other states. So that's part of my answer is we should be looking at best practices in other states. Let's not try to recreate the wheel here. There's very rural parts of Kansas and Arkansas and Texas too. What are they doing that maybe we should be doing as a state? And so we're looking at other states. I will say that the incentives, that kind of gets into the incentive conversation and argument at times. Incentivizing doctors to move to rural parts of the country has worked. Paying off student loans for doctors to live in a rural part of the country to pay off those student loans has worked really well for some states. It's worked well for us. A lot of those rural areas will tell you they prefer to bring back local talent. So someone that grew up in Altus, they would like someone to be from Altus to move home because you can keep them there long term. It's kind of like the Teach for America program. There's people that really love that program, and then there's people that say, well, listen, you're not really building a lot of stability because that teacher's there for a year or two, and then they move on. I would rather have them be there for a year or two, and then we figure out getting someone else into the pipeline. But for me, I'm a supporter of incentives. I do think they help from a pipeline perspective of getting good doctors or good teachers and anything in between, for that matter, to more rural parts of this state or any state, for that matter.
What other factors do you think influence a physician, somebody who grew up in rural Oklahoma, got their medical degree, did the residency, fellowship, all of their training, to bring them back to that rural community? What else is influencing that decision? What more can be done at a state level? And where does the quality of public education fit into that discussion?
That was going to be probably the first thing that I was going to mention. But quality of education, but quality of life. I mean, just the overarching theme of quality of life. And that probably, yes, does start with public education. Or other options in a rural community. To have very good public schools is priority number one. But to have other choice options, charter schools, private school options, there's a lot of rural communities around the state that have good public schools, but they don't have other options. They don't have a lot of other private options or charters. And that needs to change too. We need to be a full buffet state when it comes to education. But public education is number one. So it starts there. Those public schools in rural parts of this country really they're the backbone. They're the heartbeat of any community. They're the pride point of communities as well. And so that does mean 23rd and Lincoln, the state capital, we should make sure that we continue to invest in public education so that we have a pipeline of people in the state that want to be public school teachers. But that also means addressing disciplinary issues that we see today because the culture is different. That means addressing class sizes so the teachers want to teach. So I could really get in the weeds on that, but it does start with public education. But then I could get into, everything from arts programs to trail systems to museums, the other quality of life, retail, other quality of life features that any city needs to have. I'm not saying you have to have a huge mall, but a thriving Main Street with a few retail shops, and even just something as simple as a coffee shop does matter. It really, really matters to a young family that may want to move back to a rural community in Oklahoma. Being able to say that you're still an hour or two away from an urban area is helpful. But you better have a few retail options. You better have a local community, which means a local mayor and city management system that is investing in their Main Street, because those are things that do keep families away.
Where does rural infrastructure fit into this conversation? And circling back to growth in remote medicine, one of the constraints is access to broadband.
Yeah, no doubt. So, the broadband piece I'm very bold on, just because there's so many federal dollars that are coming into states right now to pay for broadband. 95% of the state of Oklahoma will have access to affordable internet service within 3 years, the next 3 years. I mean, that is a guarantee. And it's a guarantee because we're getting hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government that has to specifically go to that. So we have a broadband council. I'm actually on it, that we're going to be awarding contracts over the next 2 years to take care of those services. And most of it's going to be fiber as well. I mean, this is going to be stuff that's going to be laid into the ground. So I feel very good and bold on broadband, but I feel less optimistic on rural 2-lane highways and having shoulders on those highways for that matter. That a lot of our deaths of childhood deaths in this state are on rural 2-lane highways. They're not on turnpikes. Some of them, yes, are on turnpikes, but a lot of them are in rural parts of this state. A lot of bike accidents and bystanders that are just getting hit. It's on those rural 2 lanes that don't have shoulders, and that takes a lot of money. You talk to any county commissioner, any rural county commissioner, they'll talk about it because they're having to make tough decisions, those rural commissioners, of do I grind this road up and turn it back into gravel, or do I fix it, because they're on very limited budgets. ODOT, our Oklahoma Department of Transportation, yes, has a responsibility to fix ODOT roads or Pike Pass roads. But when it comes to those rural roads, a lot of that is not their responsibility. It's those county commissioners. So the state of Oklahoma needs to continue. We're not doing a bad job there, but we need to make sure that we prioritize the partnership between ODOT and those rural county commissioners to make sure that we are making sure that we have safe roads and bridges in rural Oklahoma. And that really then goes to public transportation in rural areas. Tulsa and Oklahoma City are able to brag about the public transportation options that Tulsa and Oklahoma City have. But what about Weatherford? What about Altus? What about Woodward? Is there a state responsibility to help with public transportation in some of those more rural areas? It starts, yes, with those communities alone to make sure we have good bus access or other public transportation options. Because, again, when it comes to workforce issues, if you don't have public transportation, then that's one more mark against that community to provide jobs to those companies that may want to relocate there.
What do you see as the industries of the future that will provide high-paying jobs for your children's generation and their children's generation? And what is Oklahoma doing today to help position our state to be competitive on a national and global level?
What's exciting is I would still start with our energy industry, because our energy industry is getting much more innovative. When people think of Oklahoma, they think oil and gas, and I want them to continue to think oil and gas. I want us to get more diversified as an economy. But the two top industries in the state, oil and gas, or energy overall. Number 2 is aerospace and aviation. So the innovation that is happening in energy, oil and gas is still priority, but wind, solar, hydrogen are going to provide a lot of high-paying jobs into the future. I still firmly believe it's going to be driven by oil and gas, and I'm glad that it will. But there's so much there's a lot of exciting innovation happening in that, as I said, in that oil and gas industry as well. So, when I talk to kids today, there's still going to be a whole lot of oil and gas jobs in this state 10 years from now and 50 years from now. They may be different. It may look different. A Continental may look a little different. Devon may look a little different. But when I say different, it means more innovative. It's still going to be oil and gas. We're still going to have a whole lot of oil and gas in the ground here in Oklahoma, particularly on the natural gas side. Aviation and aerospace, though, is the industry that a lot of people are pointing to the jobs of the future. We are a aviation and aerospace state largely because of the military bases that we've been able to protect in the state. James Mountain Inhofe, protected all of our military bases for decades and decades during BRAC shutdowns. And so we have companies, the Boeings and the Lockheed Martins of the world, that are in Oklahoma because they're able to get contracts, federal contracts from the federal government. That's great, but it can't just be that. And that's what's very exciting is today Oklahoma is offering more aviation curriculum in our high schools than any other state in the country. We're number one on a very good list, and we're offering more aviation curriculum in our high schools than any other state in the country. Because we have such a lack of pilots in this country. It's a huge crisis, just as much of a crisis as it is with teachers and nursing degrees. And Oklahoma is leading the way on that. Drone technology, space exploration. We have only one of 12 spaceports in America at Burns Flat. So if we lean into that, I think Oklahoma truly can be, I would argue, the number one state in the country when it comes to aviation and aerospace growth for companies. And that's going to be very good for investors wanting to invest in those startups. And I see huge growth potential all across the state, rural and urban areas, when it comes to energy and aerospace and aviation.
Those are all great points and exciting areas where I think Oklahoma can thrive. How is Oklahoma thinking about thriving in the age of artificial intelligence? And I look at a state like Delaware. Tiny Delaware has a monopoly on corporations that are domiciled in the state, yes, or have some affiliation, and they have great case law. There's a regulatory framework that makes sense. But I think with the age of AI, there's an opportunity for a new state to create a new framework and to usurp Delaware as the choice location that every company wants to have their headquarters, or at least on paper, be an Oklahoma entity. How do we win in that space?
Yeah, well, and you're exactly right. Oklahoma should be looking at AI and what is happening with that emerging technology and saying, why not Oklahoma? And why not Oklahoma? Because of our energy, because of our affordable energy. And what I'm learning, again, when it comes to AI, and the energy that is needed from the companies that are in that space. A lot of that warehousing when it comes to AI and that digital space is in the state of Virginia today. Well, they're really running out of space. And Oklahoma, I've had a lot of AI experts say Oklahoma should make a play of being the AI center of the country, being really planting our flag on that, specific because of our affordable energy, because we're where East meets West, right here in the middle of the country. So we have an emerging technology committee. I'm not a big fan of creating up committees and blue ribbon panels, but for this we need one. And we've had now 4 meetings. This was stood up about a year ago. The Governor Stitt, created an executive order and created an emerging technology committee. And really, it's an AI task force to talk about what the state government should be doing to address AI. But what are the opportunities? What are the opportunities when it comes to Oklahoma in the AI space? And it's been fascinating to be in those meetings, to talk about what that means when it comes to workforce. I've talked to a number of startup companies over the last few months in my role as Secretary of Workforce, with companies that are pitching Oklahoma on workforce AI products to help get more people into the workforce that I firmly believe are going to help move our labor participation rate much higher. But specifically to your point, I do believe that Oklahoma can make a play to be, the Delaware of AI and emerging technologies because of our affordable energy that we have and the amount of energy that is going to be needed in that space.
Where do the incentives come from the executive branch, from the legislative branch, for industries to bring companies to Oklahoma? And what are the priorities amongst those industries? And where does AI fall on that priority list?
Well, and that's a key point. What are our priorities? Because, I mentioned this when I'm speaking to different startup kind of type of events. And we have 100 open projects right now at the Department of Commerce on an Excel spreadsheet. And those are 100 companies that we've talked to over the last 30 days. So these are active projects. Most of those are companies that are want to relocate to Oklahoma. Some of them are existing businesses in Oklahoma that want to grow, but 75, 80% of them are out of state or out of the country. And they're not really prioritized right now. It's just people that want to come to Oklahoma. And historically, that our Department of Commerce has said, well, yeah, the answer is yes. We want you in Oklahoma. And I think we have the luxury now, because a lot of people are looking at Oklahoma, that we should be more strategic. We should be prioritizing, I believe, the companies of the future, industries of the future that we believe are going to really be able to scale themselves. Not that we want to turn away anybody, but we should be prioritizing companies. It's why, and this was a good thing, a couple years ago, we created the ACES program inside our Department of Commerce, which is our division that is focused on aerospace and aviation growth. It is going around the world trying to recruit those companies to Oklahoma. Because the company that we can move to here tomorrow that may have 10 jobs may be the Paycom of the future. And those are the kind of companies that we really want. So it starts there, I think, is prioritizing what does Oklahoma do well? What would work really well in Oklahoma because of the natural resources that we already have? But we have to ask that question first. And then it gets into, okay, if they are interested and we think it's the right company for Oklahoma, what can we offer them as far as incentives? And we have Quality Jobs Act in Oklahoma, which is a performance-based incentive. So if you bring enough employees, there's tax breaks to those companies. It's a very competitive incentive for a large company. So think of if Dell wanted to relocate another office to Oklahoma, they brought 1,000 employees, they would be able to qualify for the Quality Jobs Act. Our Quick Action Closing Fund is something that we talk about a lot because most states now have what is called a Governor's Quick Action Closing Fund, which is really what companies today are demanding. Okay, yes, I see you have a performance-based incentive that I'm able to qualify for just like any other company would, but what else do you got? Because this building that we want is going to take about $3 million to blow out the back of it so we can expand. Do you have another fund of dollars? And the answer in Oklahoma is yes. We have a Governor's Quick Action Closing Fund where the Department of Commerce will qualify up to a certain amount based upon a formula that we have. We take that number to the governor, and we'll say, Governor, this company wants to come. They're already qualifying for these two performance-based incentives, but we also are recommending to you that you spend up to $2 million in your Quick Action Closing Fund for us to close the deal. It's not much more complicated than that if it meets triggers at our Department of Commerce. And so those are a couple incentives that we talk about. The legislature is always looking at other ways for us to be competitive, though. They created a PREP fund 2 legislative sessions ago that is money, that it's state dollars that we are appropriating to the Department of Commerce to go into cities to fix industrial parks, make them shovel ready. And that really helps in rural parts of the state. If a company wants to move to Shawnee, Oklahoma, well, now we have an industrial park that is shovel ready. We've invested, say we invest a $5 million investment into that industrial park. So that when a company comes calling, they don't have to make that investment. The state of Oklahoma has already made that investment for them.
You said something that I really want to follow up on, and that was that 10-person company could be the next Paycom. We know that a lot of cutting-edge innovations happen in garages with super small teams, very early stage startups. We're looking at national declines and research and development that are happening at corporate levels. More and more of our innovation is shifting to earlier stage companies. How do early stage companies get on your radar when it seems like so much of the current focus is based on how many employees do you have right now? What does it look like right now? And how do you balance that with knowing that a lot of the cutting edge industries and technologies have small teams that might just be a blip on the radar, but really move the needle long term?
Yeah, so we're having that conversation right now at our Department of Commerce, is focusing Commerce, the business development team at Commerce, to be laser focused on that search, yes, around the world, but have a research team, really investing more state dollars into that research team that is going around finding, and again, we're certainly asking the Cortados of the world and the ecosystem that's in Oklahoma that's already talking to those companies. Obviously, we're doing that. But inside our Department of Commerce, we have to have a research team, a very good research team, larger than we have currently right now, that's able to be at that level of identifying those companies that are operating in garages right now and taking a risk on some of those, because I believe that is a good investment to go find those companies, and again, go find those people. Those are individuals. To your point, we're not even talking about a company yet. A lot of times it is that one individual in a garage that's pitching it to an OCAST or an I2E in Oklahoma, that we, the state of Oklahoma, need to make sure that they don't go to Kansas City, they don't go to Bentonville, they don't go to these other cities that may be investing in those entrepreneurs as well, but that we can keep them here in Oklahoma. So for me, it's a research team at our Department of Commerce that's talking to those startup, the venture capital firms that we have here, the Verges of the world, the 36 Degrees Norths of the world, where those people in the garages, if they get out of the garage and they actually go ask for help, those are some of the first places they go. And we need them to know that they need to immediately call us at the Department of Commerce because we want to help them.
So from an entrepreneur's perspective, and I've worked in tech startups in Dallas and San Francisco, Oklahoma, what I can tell you is that all of this ecosystem talk is great, but at the end of the day, that doesn't pay my engineers.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It all comes down to dollars and cents.
Yep.
And you said that it was important for you guys to leverage the Cortados of the world to talk to these individuals, to source companies, to advise you on what the innovative solutions are that make sense to take root in this part of the country. What can state and local governments do better, or Oklahoma do better, to incentivize venture capital firms? And how can we work with pools of government resources, be it through pension funds, commissioners of land's office? How can we incentivize them to contribute to local venture capital, which is the hand that feeds the entrepreneurs?
No doubt.
But for that, no early stage entrepreneur would come here.
It's true. So I'll start there. So we had a great launch a few weeks ago. So this is very timely. And Cortado was there, and a number of other venture firms, I guess I would call them, around the state, that ecosystem around the state of Oklahoma, and brought in our pension funds, brought in our land office, and the firefighters, and other larger pension funds in Oklahoma, because we passed legislation a couple years ago as well to really incentivize our Oklahoma pension funds to be working with the Cortados of the world and that ecosystem around the state of Oklahoma. So we're just starting that. But I will say we've taken some physical moves to make it easier for state of Oklahoma to be partnering with the startups and venture firms that we have around the state of Oklahoma. And I think there'll be a number of success stories over the next couple of years in that space. I mean, I know a number of those venture firms are already having meetings with our state pension funds. So that's a piece of it. I do think in the years ahead, there probably will be further legislation, I spoke to it, of other incentives that the state of Oklahoma is going to be creating, like these prep funds that, again, are state dollars that we're investing in a city or potentially into an entrepreneurial fund somewhere. I2E, again, that's a state entity that we have that a lot of states don't have that, an actual investment fund. Oklahoma does, that's been helping entrepreneurs for decades. And so let's not overcomplicate it. It may mean more money to an I2E so they can do more than what they're doing right now. It could be certainly more money to OCAST, for example, that has this innovation pipeline model already in Oklahoma. Further state dollars, further state resources for them that are already investing in entrepreneurs, but let's do more of that. And then I'd mention our career tech system as well. If you have an entrepreneur, connect the dots for them, right? The entrepreneur's been able to get startup cash. They've been able to get investors in Oklahoma. Well, then they got to find that workforce. If they go from their garage and they move out of their garage and they move into an office building because they've gone from 2 employees to 20, where are they going to find people with skills, right? Yeah, we got our flagship universities, we got our regional universities that are wonderful, but it may be something down at the local career tech that is going to meet their demands and needs. And we trained 11,000 kids and working adults through a career tech center last year. Well, we turned away 11,000 as well. That's a problem. And so that means we need more money for more classrooms and more teachers so that we're able to train kids and working adults to be able to go into those trade crafts as well that a lot of entrepreneurs need.
So on a national level, we want to recruit the best tech talent, the best tech entrepreneurs, but we also have to recognize that people in the tech industry, typically highly educated, highly skilled, they don't always share the same social values that we hear being championed at the Capitol.
Yeah.
How do we create an environment where they feel welcome and they don't look at the rhetoric at the Capitol and say, I don't want to raise my kids in that state?
Yeah. I talk to that tech space a lot. It's really not even the tech space. I mean, I would say next generation talent all the time about this. And, the Tulsa Remote program is a program that has been able to lure a couple thousand people to the city the last 5 to 10 years. They just celebrated their 5-year anniversary, I think, and it comes up a lot. Talking to those individuals. All politics is local. Is the first thing that I talk to them about. So yes, it matters what's happening at 23rd and Lincoln. Of course it does. But I would argue it's more important at a local level. What is the school board in Oklahoma City and Tulsa doing to make sure that there's great public schools? Yes, 23rd and Lincoln funds some of education, but we don't control what the local school board does. The local school board is who decides that curriculum in Oklahoma City public schools or Tulsa public schools, for example. The superintendent, is hired by the local school board, not hired by us. So because education usually comes up. That is such a local issue. Such a local issue. Is it a city manager type of government, or is it a strong mayor system? In Oklahoma City, it's a city manager. Yes, you've got a mayor, but the mayor is just one of a number of city council. In Tulsa, it's a more stronger mayoral system. You have to affect change there too. And I will say, Tulsa and Oklahoma City, both of our urban economic engines, I guess you could argue, in the state of Oklahoma, have done a very good job of saying we're for everybody. We're going to support anybody that wants to move to the city of Oklahoma City or the city of Tulsa. And they demonstrate that by policies and procedures that they're putting together at a local level. And I think you're going to see in this country over the next decade a whole lot more of that. There could be a federal policy that prohibits, an entrepreneur. But what's a city and a state doing to maybe push back on that or combat that? That's kind of been my answer. I mean, you can look at a lot of different states, whether it be a more conservative state or a more liberal state, and then you can look at what cities are doing that may be different than what they're doing down at their state capitals. And I think it matters just as much, or I would argue it matters more than a lot of times what's happening down at a state capital.
How should government balance the needs of older voters who vote in a disproportionate percentage relative to younger voters? Everybody should vote,
yes,
but that's just
everybody.
Pragmatically, that's just how it happens.
Yeah.
With the fact that they have fewer years left and they're focused on the here and now.
Yeah.
And as a government official who has kids and who will have grandkids and wants the best for Oklahoma long term, how do you balance that conversation?
Yeah, for me, when I'm talking to baby boomers, who, baby boomers still control most of all the disposable income in this country, and they still do vote at a proportion larger than some of these younger generations, but it's starting to even out. The generations, millennial generation, Generation X, will have far more buying power than millennials in a few years even. When I'm talking to baby boomers, that's the first thing I tell them. Hey, you're still really, really important. we still love you just as much as we've ever loved you. But you do need to be thinking about the next generation, because you need to be thinking about taxpayers, the future taxpayers of this country, because they're the ones that are going to be supporting baby boomers in their later years. And those baby boomers, they have grandkids. Most of them have grandkids, and most of those baby boomers want their grandkids to be able to find a job in the state of Oklahoma. And so I try to bring it back to that level for them, that yes, taxes and tax policy is different for a baby boomer versus a college kid. But there's also decisions that we're making that affects whether a baby boomer or a college kid at a basic level. And that is building a state where the tax burden is not just on a few, but that you have more taxpayers in Oklahoma sharing that tax burden. And I talk to them about that a lot. Oklahoma still has a lot of room to grow. And I want Oklahoma to grow because I want more taxpayers, not more taxes. And for us to have more taxpayers and not have to raise taxes, we need more startup companies turning into Paycoms. We need more entrepreneurs choosing Oklahoma versus the state of Texas or Arkansas or Kansas, some of those other regional states that are competing against us. I bring it back down to that level because I feel like any Republican, Democrat, or Independent should be able to rally around that. For Oklahoma to grow, we have to literally grow. We need more people inside the state of Oklahoma, which is going to then provide more job opportunities for those baby boomers' kids and grandkids.
How would shifting the tax burden from the highest earners and biggest corporations to be spread more broadly around the middle class attract the earlier stage entrepreneur who has great potential but is not currently a high earner? That seems contrary to their interests.
Well, and on that, that gets back to the full buffet conversation. There has to be incentives in place for entrepreneurs at a city level, and again, a lot of them are at a city level. Tulsa and Oklahoma City are offering a lot of different incentives for those local entrepreneurs, while at the same time telling that entrepreneur, listen, our vision as a state is to get more help for you. And to get more help for you means more people in the city of Tulsa or anywhere around the state of Oklahoma. Because eventually that entrepreneur, if they are successful, to your point, are going to be paying a much larger proportion of that tax burden if we are a state that is not growing healthy. And we're not going to be a healthy state if only Oklahoma City and Tulsa are growing and we're losing more and more population in rural areas. And we only have 61% of the state participating in our labor pool, which right now, Oklahoma has about a 61% labor participation rate. Kansas is 66%. So we need to get more competitive when it comes to the people that are sitting in Oklahoma right now, and some of them, may be sitting on a couch thinking, I don't want to go work. Well, how do we incentivize that person to get out of their house and back into the labor pool? That is going to help that local entrepreneur. It's going to help that local entrepreneur find more people to potentially hire, but it's also going to help share that tax load. If you get one more person out of the house to a job to pay taxes, that's going to help the state of Oklahoma.
I'm glad to hear you talking about labor force participation. I feel like at a national level, so many people talk about the unemployment rate.
Right.
And it's like, okay,
yeah,
let's step back to reality
Correct.
here and let's talk about what matters.
Yep.
Oklahoma is not one of the highest achieving states when it comes to labor force participation. We have huge opportunity for growth in that area. I'm particularly interested about the people, the least among us, who are going through transitional periods in their lives. The person who's in a transitional shelter bed at a homeless shelter, somebody who's transitioning out of prison, somebody who's at a sober living facility. How do we help close that gap
Yeah.
where they can cross that credibility chasm
Yeah.
and you can empower them to walk into a job interview and convey credibility, and you can de-risk the value proposition for companies to hire those individuals.
Yeah, well, I'll give Governor Stitt a lot of credit here. That'll be one of his legacies in his 8 years in office is criminal justice reform. Largest commutation in the history of America was by Governor Stitt in the state of Oklahoma a couple years ago. Sarah Stitt, the First Lady, that is her true north. That is her issue as First Lady is criminal justice reform. Specific to we're talking specific to the prison systems, making sure that we're developing skills in those prisoners when they do get out of prison. It's not just giving them the $25 check and go back home and hey, good luck reentering the workforce. We got to do a whole lot better than that, and we've taken a lot of steps, I believe, over the last few years. To first off, just wave the flag. Hey, listen, Oklahoma, we have more people incarcerated than we should. And once they are out of prison, how do we get them back into the workforce? And there's a lot of state agencies that are working on that issue right now. And our recidivism rate as well, keeping that low. Once they get out of prison, if they have a job, they're less likely to go back to prison. It's all connected. And I give the governor credit. He's putting more resources behind it. Then you get into those with developmental disabilities. We have a great Oklahoma agency that is addressing those with disabilities in Oklahoma to get them back into the workforce. We have the Oklahoma Employment Security Commission that is in charge of veteran reentry programs, which I'm very intrigued by. I'm very passionate about because of our veteran population that we have in Oklahoma. And to your point, though, we need to help those that need it the most. Our heroes that are coming back that have protected us. But not only are those our heroes, we have veterans that are retiring in their mid-40s now that want to reenter the workforce. And by the way, they have really valuable skills that a lot of companies would love to have. How do we help those veterans when they come back to America, serving overseas, for example, to choose Oklahoma to retire in? Because that's a big step right there. For them to choose to relocate back into Oklahoma, and then them locking in with our Oklahoma Works program, which is underneath OESC, and getting them back into the workforce. So, I'm kind of getting into the weeds there, but it is an area where I'm very passionate about it because I think we can move that 61 to 65% pretty quick because we know what some of those barriers are because we're listening to employers and listening to cities. That gets, we know we have affordable housing shortages really everywhere, not just in rural areas, but it's in urban areas too. We know we have childcare deserts around the state of Oklahoma that we have to address as a state. And there is a state responsibility there. It's not just on the local community. So I have a list of about 10 to 15 different things. And it is everything from, how do we help veterans? How do we help those that need it the most? To child care services and affordable housing. And we got to do it all. If we do 10 out of 10 things over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to move that labor participation rate in Oklahoma.
Great. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. So thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate the candid conversation.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.